Hey everyone, welcome to the Note Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Deppen, and today I'm joined by DJ Olojo from the Foreclosure Fix podcast. DJ, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Dan. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, anytime. No, glad you could join. I was happy to have you on because you come at the note space and working with borrowers from a little bit different angle than a lot of the folks that we talk to. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you do with the Foreclosure Fix and how you work with borrowers.
Well, the angle I come at is the angle of a win-win resolution. And what I mean by win-win resolution, I always want what's best for the homeowner, as long as that means that as a lender, we are getting satisfied, if that makes sense. And so I have been in the real estate industry for 15 years or so, and I started off on the residential fix and flip side. And so my first acquisition in real estate was actually partnering with folks and purchasing a property at the foreclosure courthouse steps. And so that's how I got into real estate, buying foreclosures. And as my real estate career has evolved, that went from just buying foreclosure on the courthouse steps to eventually becoming a distressed debt investor on the lender side. And so I've seen both sides, from the acquisition as an investor to also being the lender. And my biggest frustration along the way has been homeowners who basically have their head in the sand. They know that they owe this money. They know that they need to do something. And in today's environment, they have so much equity, but they just do nothing. And for lack of a better term, foreclosure hits them. And so our goal with the Foreclosure Fix podcast, our goal with the new book we just dropped called The Foreclosure Fix, 12 Proven Steps to Beat the Bank, Escape Foreclosure, and Turn Your Property into a Profitable Asset, is to help those homeowners who are facing a tough financial time understand that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that they have options, and that they communicate. If they work with their lender, they will be in a much better spot and be able to keep their house or profit from selling their house.
Very cool. So there's a lot to unpack there. So should you started doing fixer flips, buying foreclosures at sheriff's auctions. Like what gave you the idea to back it up a step and buy distressed notes? Was it that you wanted to get a hold of REOs for cheaper, or like can you explain like how did you make that shift?
Well, the shift came maybe about 10 years after investing in fix and flips, right? And so it wasn't a situation where I just said, oh, I want to be the bank now. Because in all honesty, I was like everybody else. And I thought the bank was always a big bank, like a Bank of America, Wells Fargo, or a credit union, or whatever else may be the case. Nor did I think I had enough money to be able to start being a lender or even buy distressed debt. And so I stumbled into the secondary distressed debt space by accident. And what I mean by accident, we were at the foreclosure courthouse steps, and we were looking to buy a property, and the mortgage was a second position mortgage, and it was still a first position mortgage, but the second position mortgage was foreclosing on the property. And I think we were willing to pay maybe about $50,000 or so for that second position mortgage, and then be able to pay off the first. And I think the second position mortgage ended up being like $100,000. And so we didn't buy it, obviously, because it was just too expensive. The numbers didn't work. And at the time, my business partner went back and said, hey, I'm going to try to see who the lender for this note is and see if we can go directly to them and buy it, because at that time the lender would have taken the property back, and now they're the rightful owner of the property. And so after some due diligence and him searching and seeking, he went in and he found who the owner was and contacted them. And lo and behold, they said, sure, we'll sell it to you for $50,000. And I was just gobsmacked, because I was like, why would they sell it to us at a 50% discount to what they just took it back? And so that just kind of got my wheel spinning to say, hey, there's something more here that I just don't understand and I don't know. I need to find more about. And so that took me on an exploratory journey for numerous years to be able to then understand how the secondary distressed debt market works, and being able to finally invest in notes.
No, very cool. So now is your real estate investing primarily in notes, or do you still do fix and flips?
Man, we do everything. So I would say notes is probably only about maybe about 20% of my portfolio. So my main portfolio is day-to-day fix and flipping. We also have a rental portfolio, but I'm all real estate all day, every day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So
That's pretty cool. Yeah, and that's not uncommon, right? Like a lot of people that are into notes, like a lot of times they come into it from other parts of real estate or some people kind of specialize in it like I do, but a lot of people it's like another tool in their toolkit amongst many other things that they do.
What I really love about notes and the beauty of notes for me, it's been a really safe and effective way for us to maximize our returns in our self-directed retirement accounts. I really love notes for that in particular. The other thing about notes that I love is that as I age, and I'm relatively young now, right? At least I feel like I'm young, although I have some experience. As I age, notes are a great segue where I can definitely see my portfolio changing from 20% notes to being like 80% notes, by the time I'm in my 60s, right? Because just the energy you have to run at the same pace to deal with contractors and tenants and things like that definitely changes. And so I just love it, and I'm happy that I found it earlier in my real estate investing career if I look at the whole career timeline that I have.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Because people don't realize like how many decades they can have to take advantage of notes. Like you've probably talked to some of the, I'll call them like the old dudes at some of the conferences. Like I've talked to people that started in like the early 80s and even back in the 70s, and these guys are like in their 80s and they've been doing it for 40 plus years,
Yep.
right? So if you learn the stuff, like yeah, you've really got a long time horizon where you can take advantage of it. So let's shift back to talk about the borrowers a little bit. So you're talking about how, these borrowers that are facing foreclosure, they have a tendency to stick their head in the sand. Like why would someone do that? Like how does that happen? Like to me that seems a little nuts. Like if I was in danger of losing my house, it seems like I would be all hands on deck. Like that would become my number one priority to get that figured out.
Yeah, so there's a few reasons that people stick their head in the sand, right? One is people don't realize, but foreclosure is a traumatic event. And some people are dealing with that type of trauma in their life all the time. Those people who are hoping and guessing and wishing that their debit card or credit card doesn't get declined in the store, right? That's a level of trauma. Now, obviously, it's not the same trauma as being in a war or having a health issue, but it's still traumatic to think that when I go to the grocery store, if I swipe my card, it's not going to go through. Or if I need gas in my car, I don't have that. And so foreclosure is traumatic. And when people are in traumatic situations, they tend to have like fight or flight type skills. But in a foreclosure situation where it is somewhat prolonged because the process is not just a quick 30-day process, depending on where you are at, it could be years. You kind of just
Mhm.
get immune to it. And so you're used to people calling your phone and you just stop answering. You're used to getting all these letters in the mail from attorneys, debt collectors. And typically, when people have a foreclosure issue, they often have other issues as well. The other thing that I see with borrowers when it comes to ignoring it is a lot of people just don't know, right? If you're in the hospital for a couple months and you don't have your mortgage on auto debit, you just don't think about it. You're sick, you're inundated with things. If you have the loss of a loved one and you're just overwhelmed with grief, paying your bills is not high on your priority list. And so a lot of times it's not that you have bad or unscrupulous people, it's just that life hits people and they're not prepared when life hits them because their life's not set up in order to be able to deal with it. And so people start receiving all this information, they get all this correspondence, they get a demand letter, they get attorneys reaching out, and they just become inundated because they shut everybody off. The other thing is that a lot of people are pretending. And when you are pretending, you have a facade up like everything's okay, my life is great, this will go away. And it's just not the reality. The last thing I see is that there's an overload in the decision making process because people who are facing financial uncertainty in any area of their life, there is a hard it's hard to envision what being strong financially looks like. So if you're facing foreclosure and things are just you're in the middle of the battle, it's hard to understand what it looks like to be on the other side of that. And so you get decision fatigue because every day you're making decisions on like, who do I pay? Do I pay this bill? Do I pay that bill? What do I do? And eventually people just get exhausted and they just sit and they're just waiting for a solution. And sometimes that solution comes in the form of an investor who says, hey, I can help you in this situation. And sometimes it never comes because maybe they're underwater or maybe because they just like I said, have their head in the sand. And so our goal is to help people get out of that mode and get through the stages of grieving quickly to get on the other side where they can start making some actions and doing things they need to do in order to escape foreclosure.
Yeah. So like, what are some of the things that borrowers should be doing in that situation that can help them kind of like break out of that kind of stasis that you
So
described?
yeah, I think the first thing they need to do is understand what's going on. So they need to understand that, hey, it's okay to be upset that you're in foreclosure. I think a lot of people say, well, it's my fault. Yes, it is your fault in some way, shape, or form. But sometimes I've seen people in foreclosure who it's not their fault. Maybe somebody died, or and that person was the breadwinner, and now they're in a position they never thought they would be in, or they had a health issue. We don't control that. But the big thing is that you need to understand that you have to do something, that accepting the situation and being able to move forward. And so there's a few things that I tell folks to do, and I outline this in the 12 steps we provide in the book. I think the first thing you need to do is accept it, right? And understand that it's traumatic, understand that it's bad, but accept it. The next thing you need to do is become seasonally selfish. And that term, seasonally selfish, is a term I coined to say, hey, in this season of my life, I need to work on myself. I need to work on getting my financial house in order. I need to do the things I need to do in order to help me move forward. And so that means, hey, I may not be able to go to play golf with you, right?
Yeah.
I may not be able to go out to dinner, or I may not have the time to do the things I normally need to do. I need to do what I need to do in order to keep my house. The next thing people need to do is be honest, open, and communicate. And when I say be honest, open, and communicate, I mean that in three different areas. One is being honest with your friends and your family about what you're going through. Because a lot of times, some people, in particular, older folks, have a bravado about being in foreclosure, and it's sad. And they are maybe the matriarch of their family, and they're the ones always helping everybody else. And so they have to kind of get over themselves and say, "Hey, I need help." And by doing that, they can then get tapped into different resources, which are abundant online and in other places. When I say communicate, they need to communicate with their family, but also with their loan servicer, right? If you're not communicating with the loan servicer, the attorney, the folks who are reaching out to you, trying to help resolve this issue, you are not going to go far. And you're going to find yourself in a situation where your house is at the sheriff's sale and you don't know what to do. And so those are the major things that people need to do is become seasonally selfish, communicate, ask for help, and start the process of trying to find a resolution.
Yeah, that seasonally selfish is an interesting one, right? Because like selfishness kind of gets a bad rap, but I think what you're really talking about is making sure your own house is in order first, right? Like it's hard to take care of other people if your finances and your life is a mess. So you got to like draw some boundaries
You definitely have to draw
sometimes.
some you definitely have to draw some boundaries. And the reason I like the term seasonally selfish, and I agree with you, selfishness gets a bad rap in our culture. But I think that we see people being selfish all the time for the good of everybody else. And this is an example that I use in the book, but I want to highlight here is that when you look at a professional athlete and a professional athlete who has an injury, what you would want them to do is say, keep playing basketball or keep playing football while you have your injury, right? You're not playing to your best of your ability. You're hurt, and you have the risk of hurting yourself even further and not being able to play the sport at all. Or they become seasonally selfish, do what they need to do, take time away from the game, they rehab, they work out, they see experts, and then they come back the next season and they're all star. It's the same thing in our own lives that we need to take that time out and work on ourselves, work on our finances, do the things we need to do so that when we come back to the game, we are at our highest level. And that's the seasonally selfish concept in a nutshell.
Now that makes sense. And then, the other thing we're talking about is borrowers who, they kind of keep their head in the sand and then next thing they know, they're at the foreclosure auction. Like I know as a lender, I've had a number of situations. I actually just had one kind of recently where I made many attempts to reach out to the borrower and they wouldn't talk or they would like kind of talk and they wouldn't be dealing forthrightly. And then you get all the way up to the end of the process and they're like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my house.
Yep.
and as the lender at that point, like I'm kind of done talking at that point. It's like I tried to talk, you didn't want to talk, you made me incur all these legal bills. We took it to this place. It's like, no, now we're kind of past that point, right? They need to either reinstate or lose the property at that point. And I just had a borrower reinstate recently in that situation. Yeah.
To that point, it's so interesting you say that, because I think that there are some people who get that demand letter and they are immediately like, okay, this is real, and they call their attorney immediately, and
Mhm.
they say, hey, I don't have this money, I want to work it out, can we figure something out? I'm willing to do whatever I need to do, I want to keep my house. But then you have some borrowers who play that game, like you just talked about, and we have one like this in Michigan right now. And the borrower has been lying to us for like 6 months, saying he sent payments in, and his attorney, he even has an attorney, and his attorney saying, "Hey, would you check to see if the payment's been sent?" And he's just been lying to us for 6 months, and we
That's a
found
classic one. I've had that one like many times, but yeah, sorry to interrupt.
no, no, no. And we finally have the foreclosure date set. And I get an email the other day and they're like, hey, is that modification still on the table? Excuse me? Like, you know what I mean? Like that modification left the table when you started lying, right? And so I think people need to understand they need to operate in good faith. The other part about that too, though, is people need to make a decision on what they want to do. And I've seen this in a lot of scenarios where people need to decide if they want to keep the house or let it go. And that indecision between keeping a house and letting it go, if they're a borrower, creates a lot of confusion in their head. Because if you want to keep the house, there's certain paths that you need to go down. But if you know you want to let the house go and you want to profit from it and move on, then there's a whole different path you want to go down. But understanding that you have to make that decision is the other next step to get over the hurdle of foreclosure.
Yeah, exactly. I've got another borrower now where he's like, "Oh, can we?" Well, it's a long story. We were all the way. We actually went through foreclosure before, and we got all the way up to the end, and he's like, "Oh, I think I want to sell the house. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that." And I'm like, "That's fine, but I'm not stopping the legal process at this
Yeah,
point
yeah.
because this has been long and drawn out." Like, and that's another good thing for lenders too, right? You want to be there are times when you have to start the legal process and it makes sense to stop it because the borrower is going to do something, but you want to be careful about doing that prematurely until the borrower's taken some action, like they've sent in some payments or something happened, because that can be another delay tactic.
Yeah. And as a tip, and one of the things I always want to remind people, especially for borrowers, is that a lot of times as you delay the process, not only is the interest and fees accruing, your legal costs are accruing. So if 6 months ago I had, $250 into the legal costs for a demand letter, that's a lot better for you than 6 months down the line I'm in it for $3,000 or more on attorney fees and complaints and stuff like that. You are the one who ultimately is going to pay back that money in most states. And so I just think it's really important for homeowners to understand that the longer they delay, the larger the bill gets and the less options they have available to them.
Yeah, that's an excellent call out. I think a lot of borrowers don't realize that. Like they go through all these gyrations and at the end of the day they paid more money. And
Yeah.
if they didn't have the money, like at some point, they could have worked with the lender, like especially out the gate, like if I buy a loan, engage with the borrower, I'm super willing to work with them out the gate. And some of the other things you were saying maybe think of something. I hadn't quite thought of it this way before though, but like from the borrower perspective, when they start, they have a lot of options, especially when you're dealing with a lender who's out there to find a win-win situation and work with them. But as you go through the process, their options narrow down
It,
as they go
it
along. Yeah.
well, it narrows down significantly. And one of the things that I always like to highlight for people, in particular homeowners, so they understand, is that if you are facing foreclosure and you want to get rid of your house, the more time you have, the more money you will make. And what I mean by that specifically is that typically you get the most money for a property when it's listed on the open market. And I say typically because there are exceptions to every rule. But listing something on the open market means that you have to get a real estate agent if you want to go down that road. They have to list it for you. That takes a few weeks. They want to take professional pictures sometimes. Then you're probably going to get a buyer after, 30 days or so. And that buyer probably needs another month or so to be able to close it, to be able to buy the property. That's how you're going to get the most money. So that process can take anywhere from 60 days at a minimum to probably, 120, 160 days, depending on the market you're in, the time of year. But when you have 2 weeks left and you're facing foreclosure and you want to sell, somebody who's an investor is going to come in. They're going to offer you cash. But guess what? That investor has to make money. They want to rehab the property. They paid money to market to you. They did all these different things. And so if the house was worth $200,000 and a ready, willing, and able buyer was willing to give you $200,000, that investor is going to give you 150. They're going to give you 130. And the thing is, you may only be able to accept that because you have no other options. You either lose your house or you take the low ball offer. And so I think people get frustrated because they say, well, Zillow says my house is worth a lot more. And the investor comes in and says, yeah, it maybe is worth a lot more. I'm going to sell it for a lot more. But right now, you're in a situation where you have to take my offer because you don't have many solutions on the table. And so I'm trying to help people understand and avoid being in that situation. And there are times when investors are good. I'm an investor. I'm not trying to kind of dog us out. But what I'm saying is that we're in it to make a profit and we're in it as a business. And people forget that we have holding costs, hard money costs, renovation costs, and we still try to squeak out a small profit. But to a homeowner, they just look like they're getting robbed. And it's not always the case. But if they would have done something while they had more time, they would get to a much better outcome and get a lot more money.
Yeah, I'm gonna make an analogy that might not make any sense. You ever play the game Oregon Trail back in the day?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And you start out in the beginning of the game and like you're buying supplies and doing stuff and like everything's cheaper and everything's more plentiful. And as you get like further and further out there, like everything gets more expensive and the whole situation gets dicier
Yeah, yeah.
as you go. Yeah.
Dan, I don't think you should throw out analogies like that because you're dating us, right? You know what I mean?
Oh, I know. Yeah.
See, the young kids are like Roblox, Oregon Trail. What's that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Or Minecraft for my
exactly.
daughters. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I remember that game. It was fun.
Yeah. But let's talk about the book a little bit more. So that book is coming out today. So how I'm curious as someone who wrote a book about a different topic way back in the day, like how long did that take you to write that? Like what was that process of putting the book together?
Oh, that's a really good question, right? Because the book probably took about 2 years to write. And so for all those people out there, I wrote the book before Chat GPT was popular, right? So this is not a throw some ideas in Chat GPT and let it spit out something. But basically what happened was the book is basically the same conversation I've had with homeowners for the last 12 years or so in some different form or capacity. And in my day-to-day business as a real estate investor, I'm talking to homeowners facing foreclosure weekly, daily sometimes. And so I've had the conversation. I've heard every story. I've seen every excuse. I've seen it when it works out for the homeowner and they are able to profit. I've seen it when it works out and they're able to keep their home, but I've also seen it when they didn't do what they were supposed to do and they lose their home and they're upset and they're crying and things like that. And so this is just an ongoing conversation I've had. And as my time has gotten less and less, I don't have the ability to have that many conversations. And so I said, how can I create a resource for folks going through a challenging financial situation to be able to have it all in one place? And so that's kind of what birthed the book idea. And obviously the podcast as well has provided great insight. But it's been probably about a 2 year journey from having the idea of like, maybe I should write a book to actually now being 2 years later, getting a completed product out to everybody to have and use. And I'm excited about it. I'm proud of the work, and I hope it's going to bless many people. We have a goal of trying to help 1 million people successfully navigate foreclosure, and so I hope that it gets in the hands of those people who need it.
No, that's very, very cool. Because like I said, that is a big process. Like that's not a small task to put something out there like that. And a lot of times with books, it's not like you put a book out and then you're J.K. Rowling or something like that, right? So it's a very cool service, to offer to borrowers who are in trouble. Because I've never done it, but I'm willing to bet, like if you Google like what to do when I'm in foreclosure, there's probably like a lot of scams and other stuff out there. So it's kind of cool to have that like genuinely helpful information out there for people.
Well, there are a million different scams, and we dive into that in the book. One of the chapters is called "You Are a Fat Juicy Target," right? And so it talks about all the scams that I've seen in my career, from people pretending to be attorneys to people who try to siphon money off of you, telling you that they are the lender. So we talk about that in the book, and it goes into detail into all those things. And so just super excited about the work. And there's a couple different audiences that I think that is super beneficial for. And the first audience obviously are homeowners who are facing foreclosure and their family members, right? Just to understand what that process looks like. But for those folks out there who are note investors, well, what I always tell folks is that this book is cheaper than a demand letter, right? So just get on Amazon, shoot it to your borrower who's delinquent, and for $18.99, you can have a pre-demand letter in their hands. And so
Oh, that's a good idea. I
I,
hadn't thought about it like that. Can I? Yeah, we'll have to talk after this. Maybe I could order some in bulk
hey man, I'm
because
I'm
I
happy to
send
provide it.
hello letters to borrowers, like giving them a manual. Like actually, that's kind of cool. I hadn't thought about it that way. Like I think that might make sense for lenders to pick those up to give them to their borrowers.
Well, and that's the thing, is that I sit in the seat of an investor, of a lender, of a realtor, of a builder, and so I know what all of us are looking for. And I sit across the table from folks every day who want a way out. And being able to kind of bring the best of both those worlds together is what I think this book is. And so, I think that is beneficial for folks all across the spectrum, and I'm just really hoping that it gets into the hands of people facing a hard, challenging time, and it helps them.
Yeah, because one of my first thoughts was, okay, if you got a borrower and they've got their head in the sand, if their head's in the sand, they might not go out and find the book. But if you position this like to lenders that can proactively send it to their borrowers, that may get it in a lot more people's hands where it can really do them some good.
Well, that's our hope, right? And so, you talk about the foreclosure fix and what we're looking to do. Essentially, the foreclosure fix is the podcast, which is all about helping homeowners and telling the story of people who are on this other side of home ownership. I mean, on the other side of foreclosure to successful home ownership. And then the other part about it is that we are really a referral network. And so for homeowners who may call in and say, hey, I need help, or they reach out to us and say, I need help, we are not the ones going and trying to dive into their situation. We are able to refer them to HUD approved counselors. We're able to give them advice to say, you need to contact your lender. But then the other part is that we have a referral network of real estate agents across the country who are able to connect with them and give them the exact foreclosure fix playbook. And by doing that, it allows us to have a one-on-one connection with somebody at a high level, and they get good advice from people who have their vested interest at heart.
No, that's super cool. So I think this is probably a good stopping point right now. So DJ, thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate it. And congratulations on the book and the launch. And yeah, I'd love to have you on again sometime in the future.
Hey man, I appreciate you so much, Dan. Thanks for all that you do for the notes community, for your great content, and for helping note investors and homeowners, move along that journey successfully. If you want to check out the book, you can definitely check it out at www.theforeclosurefix.com. You can order it, you can send it, or shoot me an email if you need anything. Happy to help@help@theforeclosurefix.com. Thanks so much, Dan.
No, thanks a lot, DJ. And I'll put all those links in the show notes so people can find them there as well. So, all right, man. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.
All right, take care. Be blessed.
All right.